Hello, my name is Maxwell Zellis, and I'm in Group 18 presenting my BE1500 project. This is our Excel file that we're pulling our data from. It's over 10,000 cities sorted by population rank, and it is 75 data points from November 2010 to January 2017. And so, jumping right into our code, um, this is our switch case. It's basically our main menu. Pulls in the data and then opens up this in order to get your selection. You have five cases, and the sixth case is the end case. Okay, so the first case that we're going to be running into, it asks you for the input of two cities by population rank, and then the time frame that you want to be comparing those two cities' rents. Okay, so I'm going to do the second ranking city and the 56th ranking city, and then I want to compare the first month through the 12th month. Okay, and so once this script asks you for those inputs, the variables come over here and call this function, which opens up the data and sets all these initializing variables as like counters and the vectors that need to be initialized for the city. Okay, so here the for loop runs from the first to the last month that you entered for that city, right? So it goes through the 12 months that I wanted to search at this for loop, and then down here it does the same thing for the second city. And then so instead of having it as a vector as just two rows going all the way across with these numbers, it transposes the data into make it a table, easier to read. And then once the table is finished, each of these data points are output into one window, and you can see the correlation in the curve in that. Okay, so moving on, we run this again, and we have this one was done on a MacBook, and this one was done on a MacBook, so I'm going to do those last because it seems to take the longest time. Okay, so moving down here to case 3, again, ask the city, or ask the prompts the user for 3 inputs, being the city names, and so we'll just type in Chicago, okay, Detroit, and Omaha, just because those are cities that I know how to spell. And then so once those inputs are selected, they get sent over here and calls this function. And again, the XLS read pulls open the data, and it creates a vector for the city and initializes the counters and things like that. Okay, and so while it's searching for the city down here, it's incrementing and it's going through and it's summing up each of the elements as it goes. Okay, so it sums, and once it realizes that yes, that's the correct city, it breaks this loop. Same thing for the second city, same thing for the third city. Okay, and so once it has the total, it comes here and it divides the total over the number of months that it actually averages, basically. And so once that happens, all of this data gets output to a nice bar graph with your Chicago, Detroit, and Omaha cities being there respectively. Okay, moving on to the next case, being the city min-max, which prompts the user, again, over here, input the name of a city, and then once that's completed, it calls this function, which runs through, opens the data, creates the vector for the city, and initializes the variables again. And for the counter, just much like before, where it runs through, taking the minimum as it runs through each element of the city, it takes the minimum and maximum and compares it to the previous one. Okay, and then once the city name is complete and they equal each other, and in this case is this true false statement becomes 1 and ending this while loop, and then it outputs the maximum and minimum of the city. Okay, so say we want to find the maximum and minimum of New York, and just like that, it runs through the data, finding the maximum and minimum. Once it realizes, yes, this is New York, it exits this loop and will output the data here momentarily. As you can see, maximum and then the minimum. Okay, moving on to the next case. These are the two cases that were done on the Macintosh computer. So some of the variables format weird and they give you a little error, but it's only because we're running it on a different PC instead of a Mac. And so now we're going to do our city search, and this function, script rather, goes in, again, opens the data and prompts the user for 1 or 2 city names. Now this one's going to take a while, so I'm going to explain it and then pause it. And so once the city names have been input, it comes down to this if statement, and it says, was there a second city entered, yes or no? And if it's no, then it will just run the script, but it will only do it for the 1 city because this will be set to 0, okay? Onto this nested loop. Once this if statement is complete and it recognizes that you actually entered something, it comes down and it actually, if the city name matches the rent prices, it gets assigned to a vector, right? So once you enter in your city name, it goes through and it increments and makes the city with a vector. Okay, else it just does the 1 city, right? If you enter 0 up here, it just does the 1 city for you. And down here is the curve fitting tool that my group mate had the license for, but it actually expired. So this was working at one point, but is not as of right now. And then, so once this data is collected and it has 1 or 2 cities as a vector, it comes down and it plots it as a line graph. So now I've ran this because it takes a long time, and this warning is just, again, because of the formatting issue, because he completed this portion on a Mac. Okay, so enter a city name as a string. We'll just do Chicago again. And then, do we want another city name? Yes or no? We'll try Detroit. And now this is going to think for a little bit. If I were to enter just an N right there, it would just plot this graph with just Chicago here, and it would have N, and it wouldn't present this green line had I only entered 1 city. Okay, so now moving on to the next function that was done on a Mac. So it's going to take a long time, some editing required. Actually, this file is already open, as you can tell. So now we entered low rent. It comes over here and again prompts the user for the input of a city that you want to find the lowest rent in, and then it calls this function with the input that you entered. And I guess since the data was already open, it's just running fairly quickly now. So once this data is in here, and again, it opens up the file and as a read table, and then string compare finds the city name that you were searching for, and then again just increments, goes through the city names row, and finds the average and the minimum, and then coming back here, it'll actually ask you, do you want the average when you're finished? Okay, so right now I clicked it because I wanted to find the lowest, and as a bonus, it will give me the question, do you want to find the average? And if the answer is yes, then it will output the average. So which city do you want to find the lowest rent in? Omaha, again, because we love Omaha so much. Boy, that took a long time. But we're back now with the power of editing. We get to see our final results. Again, I typed in Omaha, and we wanted to find the lowest rent over the 75-month time frame. And this warning, again, is just because of the formatting issue, because he wrote this code on a Macintosh. And so this runs the function, and then once it's finished, it fprintfs the data. Lowest rent in Omaha, which is the city we entered, is $1,162. And then it comes down here and prompts the user, would you like to find the average rent? And I enter no, just to save time. And since this statement is not Y, yes, it does not fprintf this average rent statement, which it would have found. And then that's basically our final project.